If you're scared of spiders, never ever visit Mars. In March 2025, NASA's Perseverance rover found something looking like a bunch of tiny spider eggs on the surface of the red planet. This something is made up of hundreds of little round balls stuck together. What if all these eggs hatch? Will hordes of eight-legged creatures swarm the red planet? Doubtful. The thing found by Perseverance was just sitting there on a hill called Witch Hazel, near the edge of Jezero crater. On closer inspection, it turned out to be a weirdly shaped rock with a bit of Martian dust on it. Yeah, sadly, or luckily, those weren't Martian spider eggs. Even so, the formation really stood out from everything else around it. The Perseverance team named the weird rock St. Paul's Bay. It's what scientists call a float rock. This term means that it didn't form where it was found, but somehow got moved there. So, at the moment, we don't have enough clues to figure out its background and how it got that strange texture. But that's not the only mystery. Something had to move this rock from its original spot. One theory claims that the rock could have been created when a meteorite smashed into Mars. The powerful impact must have blasted rocks into the air, and those bits could have cooled down and formed the tiny balls we see now. If that's true, this rock might have come from really far away, and it could give us new info on how big impacts move stuff around on the red planet. NASA thinks the rock might have just rolled down Witch Hazel Hill. It could have come from one of the darker layers up on the hill. We have seen those layers from space. Now, the goal is to study Witch Hazel Hill more closely and find out if those layers are made of the same stuff as the St. Paul's Bay rock. If so, it might mean a few things. Maybe there was volcanic activity in that region, or a big meteor hit, or there might have been groundwater there in the past. If this theory turns out to be true, there's a chance that some of those rocks might hold tiny fossils from ancient microbes. That's why NASA is planning to bring some of the rocks back to Earth in the 2030s with the Mars Sample Return mission. We'll get to study them up close and maybe, just maybe, find signs of ancient Martian life. Now, the funniest thing about it all is that it isn't the first time scientists have dealt with arachnids on Mars. Spiders on Mars is actually the nickname for a weird-looking surface feature. In certain places on Mars, you can see big dark cracks that spread out like spider legs. Some are huge, over 3,000 feet wide. From above, they seriously look like a bunch of creepy crawlers moving across the planet. These spooky shapes were first spotted by Mars orbiters in 2003, and they've been showing up in satellite photos ever since. At first, no one had a clue what they were, but now, scientists think they form when carbon dioxide ice, dry ice, sitting on the surface, suddenly turns straight into gas. That fast change causes gas to shoot through the ice and carve out all those strange crackly patterns. An even cooler thing is that NASA scientists have been able to recreate those Mars spiders in the lab here on Earth. They built a special setup mimicking Mars's surface and watched tiny versions of the spiders form right in front of their eyes. The team had been trying to recreate those Mars spiders for 5 years. When it finally happened, they were overjoyed. Back in 2021, scientists managed to explain how those spider-like marks form on Mars using something called the Kiefer model. The basic idea is that in spring, sunlight shines through big, clear chunks of frozen carbon dioxide, aka dry ice. That heats the Martian ground underneath, and the ice starts turning straight into gas. The gas builds up under the ice, and when the pressure gets too intense, boom, the ice cracks. Gas shoots out, dragging dark sand and dust with it, leaving behind those spooky spider patterns once the ice melts in summer. The team tested this theory using a big special chamber nicknamed Dusty. Yeah, that's a real name. It's about the size of a barrel, and can recreate the freezing cold, super low pressure conditions on Mars. We're talking about -301 degrees Fahrenheit. The researchers also put fake Martian soil in the chamber and covered it with CO2 ice. Then they used a lamp underneath the soil to heat it up, just like the sun heats up Mars. Their experiments worked, and little spider shapes formed just like they do on the red planet. The study also revealed something new. The team found that ice formed inside the ground too, and it caused the soil to crack along with the ice. This might explain why the spider's legs are so zigzagged instead of straight, like we might expect. Next, they want to keep doing experiments to figure out more about the Martian spiders, like why they only show up in some places on Mars and why they aren't getting more common over time. The red planet is apparently set on playing tricks on people from Earth. For example, in April 2023, NASA's Curiosity rover took a little break from searching for signs of ancient water on Mars and stumbled upon something curious: a travel book. Later, scientists realized that it wasn't really a book, just a rock. But it does look like a little hardcover with a page frozen mid-turn. This book rock is tiny, measuring only about 1 inch wide. So it might not hold any ancient Martian stories, but at least it's travel size. Then in January 2023, the University of Arizona shared another bizarre image: a rock formation that looked like the face of a giant teddy bear. It had two distinct beady eyes, a button nose, and an upturned mouth. It was captured by NASA's Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, which was orbiting the red planet at the time. Scientists from the University of Arizona explained that the teddy bear face was likely just a natural formation, like a broken-up hill or mound in the center of an ancient crater. Another cool find occurred in February 2022. The Curiosity rover spotted something that could only be described as a tiny flower made of minerals. It looks like little coral branches, but it's actually a mineral deposit, which is pretty rare to see in a flower-like shape. Most of these kinds of deposits are formed when ancient water mixes with rocks on the Martian surface, so they're not exactly new to scientists. But this one is unique, since it looks like a tiny plant or flower. Now, the next discovery is even wilder. Once, the Curiosity rover snapped a pic of what looked like a perfect doorway in a Martian cliff. Naturally, people started wondering if it was some kind of secret entrance, or maybe a hidden base for astronauts. But in reality, it's just a really cool rock formation. Winds and erosion carved away at the rock over time, creating a perfect symmetrical shape. Going even deeper into the past, back in 2018, a researcher noticed weird stick-like shapes in an image and thought they looked like fossilized animal footprints. Unfortunately, NASA quickly shot down the idea. Those tracks turned out to be salt deposits that formed in areas where water evaporated. You can find something similar on Earth too, for example, in dry lake beds. So, while it's pretty interesting that there's more proof that Mars used to have rivers and lakes, these tracks aren't evidence of life, just a quirky rock formation. Now, the next find is absolutely amazing. NASA's Opportunity rover found round, blueberry-like rocks on Mars back in 2004. But those aren't the kind you eat with your cereal. The blueberries you're looking at are made of iron, and they're evidence that Mars used to have a lot of water. Over billions of years, water smoothed them out and created these little balls. Scientists think that they formed when Mars was much wetter than it is now. The iron-rich blueberries are a pretty big deal because they show that Mars could have been a very different place a long time ago.
Well, here you are. You're the first person to set foot on Mars. And your first mission is to explore a place called Jezero Crater. You're wading through the thick, rust-colored dust when suddenly you trip over something and almost fall. You lean closer to examine the culprit, and recoil in horror. A skull is staring back at you. Who did it belong to? An ancient Martian dinosaur? A representative of a long-lost civilization? Now, this isn't a made-up story. That's what NASA's Mars robot called Perseverance would tell you if it could speak and, had consciousness. The rover had indeed found something strange, but it wasn't a real skull. It just looked like one. In reality, those were rocks that seemed to be out of place on the red planet. Right now, Perseverance is exploring the edge of a big, empty bowl-shaped area called Jezero Crater. Scientists think that a long time ago, this crater held a giant lake. Perhaps it was even full of tiny life. Since December 2024, the rover has been rolling down a steep hill called Witch Hazel Hill. It's an important mission because this hill might hold secrets about what Mars's weather and environment were like billions of years ago. Anyway, on April 11, 2025, Perseverance stopped to look at a special spot where two types of rock meet. One was light-colored and the other was dark. And right at that spot, scientists saw a weird-looking rock they later named Skull Hill. It stood out dramatically because it was dark and had a sharp shape. But the creepiest thing? It was full of little holes, a real nightmare for those with trypophobia. So NASA shared this discovery in a blog post. They explained that Skull Hill didn't look like the other rocks nearby. The area where Perseverance found these strange rocks is called Port Anson. Scientists think that many of the rocks there didn't originally form in that spot. They were moved from somewhere else an exceptionally long time ago. But how did they move, or what moved them? Now, don't get your hopes up. It doesn't mean we'll find space neighbors on Mars. These kinds of rocks are called floats. They are likely to have traveled a long way across Mars billions of years ago, back when the planet was much warmer and wetter, with rivers, lakes, and maybe even oceans. As the water dried up and the soft ground around the rocks slowly wore away over time, the tougher rocks stayed behind, sitting on the surface. Now scientists are trying to figure out how the strange holes on Skull Hill were made. One idea is that tiny parts of the rock broke off and wore away over time, leaving behind little pits. Another idea is that Martian winds, which carry dust and tiny rocks, might have slowly scraped the surface, kind of like sandpaper, and created the holes. Skull Hill is dark-colored, and at first, scientists thought it might be a meteorite that had come from space. But when they looked more closely at the chemicals in the rock using Perseverance's SuperCam, the results didn't match what you would expect from a typical meteorite.
Nope.
So, scientists now think Skull Hill might be a volcanic rock. On both Earth and Mars, dark volcanic rocks get their color from minerals like olivine, pyrozine, and biotite. If Skull Hill is volcanic, it might have come from old lava flows nearby that have broken down over time. Or maybe it was blasted out of the rock during a huge crash, something like an asteroid impact that dug deep into the ground and pulled up volcanic rock from below. What helps scientists in their research is that Perseverance now has some cool tricks that help it figure out what Martian rocks are made of. That's how we can learn where the rocks came from and how they formed. Lately, the rover has been super busy. In just a few months, it has collected samples from 5 rocks, studied 7 rocks very closely, and blasted 83 rocks with its laser to learn about them from a distance. That's the fastest pace of research since the rover landed on Mars 4 years ago. At least that's what NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab says. Usually, it can take months to find just one interesting rock in a crater. But up on the edge of the crater, aka the rim, cool and strange rocks are popping up all the time. Scientists are especially excited about getting these rock samples back to Earth to see if they'll show signs that life ever existed on Mars. But there's a problem. The plan to bring the samples back, called the Mars Sample Return Mission, is really complicated, expensive, and running into delays. So, for now, the samples are staying on Mars, waiting for their ride home. Hey, Uber! There's another rover that is currently working hard to help us get more information about our neighbor. That's Curiosity. and it might have found a clue about what happened to Mars's atmosphere from billions of years ago, thick and carbon dioxide rich. If the red planet once had warm temperatures and flowing water, what are the signs of all the carbon that should have been left behind? Now normally, a planet like that would have carbonates, minerals made when carbon dioxide reacts with water and rock buried in its soil. But on Mars, very few carbonates have ever been found, which has been a big mystery. Now, scientists might finally have an answer. A new study suggests that iron carbonate, called siderite, may be hidden inside Mars's sulfate-rich rock layers. These layers weren't easy to spot in satellite images from orbit. That might be the reason why carbonates may have gone unnoticed for so long. At one point in the past, Mars's carbon cycle got out of balance. The rocks started pulling in more carbon dioxide than they were releasing. Over time, this may have caused Mars to lose too much CO2 from its atmosphere. It cooled the planet and made it dry and lifeless. The planet might have been still habitable when this happened, but once carbon dioxide started turning into siderite, Mars may have begun getting too cold to support life. The Curiosity rover found these carbon-rich rocks in Gale Crater, an area on Mars that used to be full of water. The rocks also contain a lot of salts, which usually form when water dries up. This supports the idea that Mars went through some huge changes, likely from a planet with a nice climate to the cold, dry world we see today. If scientists find more siderite in other parts of Mars, it could help explain where all that ancient carbon dioxide went. Even better, it would support the idea that Mars was once warm, wet, and maybe even habitable. But that's not the only discovery Curiosity has made. The rover has a set of special instruments called SAM. Now, SAM's job is to study the rocks, dirt, and air on Mars to learn more about the planet. And one of SAM's biggest findings happened when it studied rocks from Gale Crater. SAM found organic molecules. Organic molecules are special because they're made of carbon, and on Earth, carbon is super important for life. Plants, animals, and people are all made from carbon-based molecules. So, finding these molecules on Mars makes scientists wonder if it's another proof that Mars once had life, a long, long time ago. When SAM looked even closer, it found certain patterns in gases like carbon dioxide and methane. These patterns might match what you would expect if tiny ancient life forms were making organic molecules. But there's also another explanation. These molecules might have been made by sunlight reacting with gases in Mars's air. In this case, no life would have been involved at all. On Mars, strong ultraviolet light from the sun can break apart and mix up molecules, creating new ones that eventually land on the ground. So even though scientists don't have a clear answer yet, finding organic molecules is a really big deal. At the very least, it tells us that Mars had the right ingredients for life, even if we don't know yet if life actually existed there. Now, scientists are using SAM and Curiosity's other tools to keep searching for more clues. Mars looks like a silent, barren red desert, but it hides a terrifying threat no astronaut can escape: Martians. Nah, it's worse: dust. It might sound odd at first, but Martian dust is razor-sharp, toxic, and relentless. It's filled with chemicals so dangerous they can destroy not just the technology, but your body from the inside. The dust we breathe on Earth is worn smooth over thousands of years by water and wind. But Mars doesn't have a nice, delightful atmosphere and tons of water like we do. Its dust, called regolith, is angular and cruel. And unfortunately, it doesn't want to stay politely on the ground. It's constantly falling from the sky and covering everything. Every few years, Mars undergoes planet-wide dust storms. They coat landers, vehicles, habitats in a thick, suffocating blanket. NASA's rovers have already been crippled by this invisible threat. Their Opportunity rover, the plucky machine that long outlived its original mission, was finally finished off when dust covered its solar panels. The poor rover couldn't recharge. And eventually, the dust will get into spacesuits. Then astronauts would be in danger, because this regolith is laden with some dangerous stuff. The first is silica, fine, inhalable particles. Once you breathe those in, they can cause an incurable scarring of lung tissue. Next, gypsum, a mineral that, while harmless in small doses, could also cause big respiratory issues when inhaled constantly. One of the most horrifying ones is perchlorates. These are salts that can mess up thyroid glands and create a situation where the body stops producing enough blood cells. And finally, nanophase iron oxides. These are tiny iron particles that can infiltrate the bloodstream, and trust me, that's not going to be pretty either. Martian dust is also exceptionally fine. Individual dust grains are as small as 3 micrometers, which is about the size of a mold spore. For comparison, a human hair is about 30 times thicker. That means it could get in super easily and get deep into the lungs. Once inside the body, the dust isn't easily expelled. There's this sticky mucus in human lungs that serves to keep us safe from stuff like that, designed to trap and expel invaders. But particles smaller than 5 micrometers bypass the lung's natural defenses. You might not even notice anything, while the dust would remain trapped inside you until it eventually enters the bloodstream. You might think we just have to filter it, but regolith is super hard to protect people from. Exposure to it could happen in every imaginable way – through inhalation, contaminated suits and surfaces, eye exposure, which could even lead to blindness, or even accidentally eating contaminated food and water. Sure, astronauts will be shielded inside high-tech suits, but even the best suits won't be perfect. Regolith is small and clings to surfaces even with electrostatic charges and mechanical tenacity. It can sneak into helmet seals and worm its way into ventilation systems. Or, say we build a habitat module, but its air filters could clog during a dust storm. Or the opportunity situation might repeat. Solar arrays covered with dust and failing just when life support systems need full power. The consequences for human crews could be catastrophic. But hey, luckily, there's good news. NASA is already thinking ahead about this. First, dust filtration will be essential. They want to fill habitats and rovers with high-efficiency air systems, the ones that would trap even the finest of particles. Of course, they'd still clog and would have to be replaced, which means that future missions will have to carry extra filters, enough for years of exposure or even invent self-cleaning filtration systems. There's also this thing called electrostatic repulsion devices. It's technology that uses electric fields to push dust away from surfaces. This could keep spacesuits, airlocks, and life support modules dust-free. Of course, the strictest protocols must be inside habitats. Poor astronauts would have to do home chores literally every day. Vacuum their suits, scrub floors, replace air filters. Imagine conquering other planets only to end up doing home chores again. What's even worse is that we already have space radiation, which is everywhere above the Earth's atmosphere. It's been a huge headache for decades. Adding Martian dust exposure to the mix would make that problem even worse, not even mentioning freezing nights and the lack of a supportive atmosphere. The grim truth is that there will be no emergency evacuations from Mars. The red planet lies at least 9 months of travel away from Earth. There are also communication delays of up to 22 minutes each way. So, no matter what happens, astronauts will have to be fully self-reliant. The journey to Mars is going to be messy and super complicated. Space isn't a vacation spot. Your muscles waste away in zero gravity. You experience vision loss because the brain pressures against your eyes, your blood changes, and that's just what astronauts on Earth orbit go through. And this isn't the only problem NASA is currently facing. Another one is how to send stuff there in general. You can't ship every brick and sell it to Mars. It's too heavy, too expensive, and too slow. So, our astronauts will have to DIY their way into survival right there on the spot. We'll have to grow food in red dirt, print habitats out of nothing, and engineer microbes that turn carbon dioxide into breathable oxygen. They'll also have to get used to new, weird living conditions. Mars is the 4th planet from the Sun, right after Earth, and it receives less sunlight than we do. Its gravity is about 40% of Earth's, which means when standing there, you'll feel lighter and your bones will weaken faster. 1 year there lasts 687 Earth days. But hey, you get twice the birthdays. And yeah, it's livable. is just wrapped in an unbreathable carbon dioxide atmosphere, dusted with toxic soils, and baked in unfiltered cosmic radiation. Even water exists, frozen at the poles and buried underground, though no oceans. Space living will be part science fair, part medieval farm, and part sci-fi horror. Some space agencies are talking about terraforming. That means changing Mars to be more Earth-like, thickening its atmosphere, warming its soil, releasing liquid water. Sounds like salvation, but it's actually extremely complicated and dangerous. While there are no little green people to greet us on Mars, there might still be life there, in the forms of bacteria, ancient, slow-moving, tucked deep underground. Mars used to have entire oceans covering its northern hemisphere. Back in the day, it resembled Earth. It might have had a thick atmosphere, rivers slicing through canyons, rain falling from the skies, and lakes shimmering under twin moons. But somewhere, about 3.5 billion years ago, things changed. The water dried out or froze. The planet's atmosphere thinned into a whisper. Now, all we have from this time are ancient signs, the valleys, the deltas, the hints of methane in the air. They remain like a fossil record. All this means that life could have existed on Mars. Not some big animals or human-like species, that's extremely unlikely, but some tiny organisms, and unfortunately, if they were there, we struggle to find them now. Still, some bacteria are extremely persistent. It's possible that we'll find traces of them somewhere on the Martian surface. That would be our first ever living organisms found outside our planet, and proof that extraterrestrial life is possible and not as rare as we thought. But if we start terraforming, we might destroy these ecosystems before we even find them. We could erase Mars's ancient history, its geological wonders, and its right to exist as it is. Do we really have the right to do all that just because we want beachfront property on Valles Marineris? It's the Jurassic Park dilemma all over again. We're so preoccupied with whether we could do that we don't stop to think if we should. Plus, exploring Mars isn't just about discovering life. It's about understanding Earth's future, the nature of life itself, and maybe even finding humanity's second home. We might also discover that we should put more effort into cleaning up our current home. Meanwhile, Mars researchers remain optimistic. They think that with proper planning and equipment, all the dangers are manageable. The road to Mars won't just demand bigger rockets and better suits. It will demand wisdom, and we'll see how the future unfolds.
We just found the biggest clue ever that someone lived on Mars. Or should I say, something. Because if you're picturing skinny red extraterrestrials with big goofy eyes, forget it. The Martians we're talking about looked more like this, a tiny microbe. I know, a total bummer, but this could change everything. See that weird pattern on the rock? The one that looks like leopard spots? Experts think it was left behind by ancient life. And no, it's not like someone painted it, the way early humans drew on cave walls. These little marks could actually be leftovers from microbes, signs that some pretty wild chemical reactions were happening back when they were formed. And don't worry, we'll get to that in just a second. So NASA actually found this evidence over a year ago, and they were thrilled, as this was exactly the kind of weird rock they'd been hoping to see on Mars. They thought this weird pattern might be a biosignature, in other words, a clue that life was once there. That could mean an element, a molecule, some substance, or in this case, a funky leopard print pattern on a rock. But scientists were cautious back then. After all, you can't just go around shouting, "We found life on Mars," without being absolutely sure. It could have just been, well, a cool-looking Martian rock, right? So, they studied this sample again and again. And by they, I mean more than 1,000 scientists from NASA and partner institutions all over the world. And recently, they finally came out with a paper that basically says, listen, we can't find another explanation. And that's it. With no other explanation left, this might just be the best evidence we've ever had that something really did live on Mars. The sample, nicknamed Sapphire Canyon, was collected by the Perseverance rover in July 2024. It was taken from rocky cliffs along the edges of the Neretva Vallis River Valley, a region shaped long ago by water that once flowed into Jezero Crater. And we're talking like more than 3 billion years ago. Scientists believe that back then, Neretva Vallis was filled with rushing rivers carrying mud, sand, and gravel into the lake. When the water eventually dried up, it left behind the rocky outcrop where Sapphire Canyon was found. After collecting the sample, the Perseverance rover kept exploring the river valley to get a better idea of the environment where those rocks formed, and to figure out how those leopard spots might have appeared. That step matters because knowing exactly how the spots came to be is key to figuring out if the rock really holds signs of life. In other words, did those patterns form through normal chemical processes that don't need life at all? Or were they actually left behind by microbes? What the rover's instruments found is that the rocks in this area are made of clay and silt, which is exciting, because here on Earth, those materials are great at preserving signs of ancient microbial life. The rocks are also packed with organic carbon, sulfur, oxidized iron, and phosphorus. And you know who loves that stuff? Microbes. Experts think they could have used those ingredients as an energy source, and in the process, left behind the leopard spots we can now see in high-resolution images. Remember when I said these marks might be a microbe's leftovers, right? That's exactly it. Picture you're eating a burger called the Galaxy Burger that has a one-of-a-kind sauce. A drop of that sauce falls on the table. You don't clean it up, and a second later, poof, you disappear. Later, detectives show up trying to figure out if you were there. All they find is that sauce drop you left over. From that, they can tell exactly what you were eating: the Galaxy Burger. But proving you were really there is tricky, since that sauce could have ended up there in lots of other ways. The same goes for the leopard spots. Just by looking at them, scientists can already tell a few things. For example, the pattern shows the presence of 2 iron-rich minerals, vivianite and greigite. On Earth, vivianite often turns up in sediments near decaying organic matter, or in swampy, soggy wetlands. In a similar way, microbes can also produce greigite on our planet. When you find those two together, it looks like they formed through electron transfer reactions between the sediment and organic matter. That could be a fingerprint of microbial life, because microbes use those reactions to get energy and grow. So, going back to our burger comparison, the leopard spots are like the sauce on the table, the leftovers from the process of getting energy. But that's not the only theory. The team also spotted the possible presence of hematite in the rock. And if Mars has the nickname the Red Planet, hematite is the one to blame. It's a heavy mineral that can take on a reddish tone. On Earth, people have been using it as a pigment for paint for thousands of years. Now, scientists think the leopard spots may have formed when chemical reactions with hematite turned parts of the rock from red to white. That process can release iron and phosphate and possibly cause those black rings to appear. And here's the kicker. Those reactions can also provide an energy source for microbes. For now, though, these are just theories. What we can confirm is that those chemical compounds are definitely present in the rocks. But just like in the detective story, finding the sauce drop doesn't prove it came from you. So even though these materials are great for microbes to thrive on, it doesn't automatically mean this is a biosignature. They could have also formed abiotically, or, put simply, without the presence of life. Yeah, it could happen, but for it to happen naturally, without microbes involved, you'd need 2 things: high temperatures and acidic conditions. That's the only way those chemical processes could do their magic and leave behind the leopard spots. And here's the exciting part. Scientists didn't find any sign that these Martian rocks were ever exposed to high heat or acidic conditions. That's why I said they're stumped. They just can't find another explanation. So this has to be a biosignature, right? Well, maybe not. Because there's still a possibility that organic compounds could react even under low temperatures. And maybe, just maybe, we're seeing that happening for the very first time. That's why it's so hard to confirm 100% whether this is the handiwork of ancient microbes or just a natural process. So, in the end, we're still left with more questions than answers. Right now, this precious sample is safely sealed inside a tube millions of miles away on Mars. Hopefully, one day, it'll be brought back to Earth so scientists can study it in labs here. And while we can't confirm it's a biosignature just yet, one thing is certain. This finding by Perseverance is the closest we've ever come to discovering life on Mars. Honestly, just being able to spot a potential biosignature on the red planet is already groundbreaking. Another reason this finding matters has to do with the age of the rock. This evidence comes from some of the youngest sedimentary rocks we've ever studied. Until now, scientists thought that if we ever found signs of ancient life on Mars, they'd most likely be locked inside much older rocks. But so far, nothing has shown up in those ancient formations. Finding a possible biosignature in a young rock suggests two things. First, Mars might have been habitable for longer or later in its history than we ever thought. And second, older rocks might also hold signs of life, but maybe they're just harder to spot. Someday, our technology could be advanced enough to find them. This discovery also makes us think about one of the biggest questions of all, and that is, are we truly alone in the universe, or did we just find the answer? No, not exactly, but it's the closest humanity has ever come to answering that question. On Mars, nothing is ordinary. That's why a single rock spotted by NASA's Perseverance rover in Jezero Crater has drawn everyone's attention. Its surface is covered with tiny spheres. This texture is both bizarre and weirdly, painfully familiar. Haven't we seen something similar on Earth? Yes, we have. Does it mean there's a mysterious connection between Earth and the Red Planet? NASA's Perseverance rover has been busy exploring Mars, and on August 5, 2025, it spotted something unusual. A rock that looks like it came straight out of a medieval armory. It looks like a knight's helmet forgotten after a battle. Or maybe it's the hat of a witch that crash-landed on the Red Planet. Researchers officially nicknamed the rock Hornoflia. It has a dome-shaped top with a pointed tip and a rim that flares out. Its surface is rough and covered with tiny bumps. But the coolest thing is that the rock isn't just lumpy. It's made up almost entirely of little round spheres. Imagine bubble wrap that someone balled up and spray painted Mars red. Here you go. Geologists aren't too impressed by the rock's shape, but its composition makes them raise their eyebrows. Such little spheres could have formed in a few days. Chemical weathering, volcanic activity, or if rock vaporized by a meteorite cooled down and condensed. On Earth, rocks with similar textures sometimes come from processes involving water, and this is one of the reasons why everyone is so excited now. If underground waters had a hand in shaping the rock, it could mean there was a lot of water on Mars in the past. And water means life. Now, another cool thing about this helmet is that it's a floating rock. The term means that it looks completely different from those around it. Basically, this rock doesn't belong to the area where the rover found it. The best guess is that it was launched from another location. Maybe it was a volcanic eruption, or more likely, an asteroid smacked into the Martian surface and flung it across the landscape. Interestingly, this isn't the first bubble rock Perseverance has seen. Back in March 2025, it found another sphere-covered rock, and some of the tiny balls had holes in them. If you look closely at Hornoflia, you can see a bunch of those too. That might mean they're what geologists call ooids, small spherical layered grains. On Earth, ooids form when calcium carbonate builds up layer by layer in shallow water. Picture a warm, shallow sea near the equator. The water is a little choppy and waves are constantly moving things around. That's the kind of place ooids are born. They grow like pearls in oysters. An ooid starts small, usually with a tiny grain of sand or some other speck. The water is overloaded with calcium carbonate, so every time the waves move that grain around, a new layer builds up. Over time, the layers pile on, and you've got yourself a neat little ball. Sometimes the center isn't as tough as the layers surrounding it. That's why the core can dissolve or even disappear completely, leaving behind a hole. If those Martian spheres formed in the same way, this might be the reason why they have those tiny cavities inside them. But there's another possibility. On Earth, the other way of ooid formation is biological. In other words, they sometimes start with the remains of tiny living organisms. Could the ooids on the red planet have formed in the same way? Of course. This doesn't mean we can slap a "Life Found on Mars" headline on it just yet. But the fact that these holes exist is a clue that hints that Mars might have had the right kind of conditions for life. Well, maybe not seashells and oysters, but definitely something worth paying attention to. Weird Earth-like formations aren't the only intriguing things found on Mars. In March 2025, NASA's Perseverance rover spotted something that looked like a bunch of tiny spider eggs. That something was made up of hundreds of little round balls stuck together. It was just sitting there on a hill called Witch Hazel, near the edge of Jezero crater. On closer inspection, it turned out to be a weirdly shaped rock with a bit of red Martian dust on it. Yeah, sadly, or luckily, those weren't Martian spider eggs. Even so, the formation really stood out from everything else around it. The Perseverance team named the weird rock St. Paul's Bay. It's a floating rock too, just like Hornoflia. Something once moved this rock from its original spot. One theory claims that it could have been created when a meteorite smashed into Mars. The powerful impact must have blasted rocks into the air. Then, those bits could have cooled down and formed those tiny balls. If that's true, the rock might have come from really far away. Another cool find occurred in April 2023 when NASA's Curiosity rover took a little break from searching for signs of ancient water on Mars and stumbled upon a travel book. Later, scientists figured out that it wasn't really a book, just a rock, but it does look like a little hardcover with a page frozen mid-turn. This book rock is tiny, measuring only about 1 inch wide. In February 2022, the Curiosity rover spotted something that could only be described as a tiny flower made of minerals. It looked like little coral branches, but it was actually a mineral deposit. Pretty rare to see in a flower-like shape. Most of these kinds of deposits form when ancient water mixes with rocks on the Martian surface, so they're not exactly new to scientists. But that one was unique, since it looked like a tiny plant or flower. In January 2023, the University of Arizona shared another bizarre image, a rock formation on Mars that looked like the face of a giant teddy bear. It had two distinct beady eyes, a button nose, and an upturned mouth. It was captured by NASA's Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, which was orbiting the red planet at the time. Scientists from the University of Arizona explained that the teddy bear face was likely just a natural formation, like a broken up hill or mound in the center of an ancient crater. But let's get back to Hornoflia. Perseverance snapped that strange bumpy rock photo during its 234th week on Mars, and NASA even picked it as the rover's best shot of the week. Of course, the rover's main job isn't collecting cool-looking rocks. Perseverance was launched on July 30th, 2020 with a big goal: to search for traces of ancient microbial life and figure out if Mars was ever truly habitable. That mission is connected directly to NASA's Artemis program. It's focused on setting up a long-term base on the Moon. The idea is that such colonies on Earth's natural satellite will help manage and support the first astronaut landing on Mars. At the same time, SpaceX CEO Elon Musk has his own ideas. He wants to send uncrewed missions to Mars as soon as the end of 2026. In the meantime, Perseverance has been busy. Its first assignment was exploring Jezero Crater, a site chosen because it once held water. After 3 years of work, the rover wrapped up its full survey of the crater. It happened in December 2024. NASA explained why this mattered. If Mars really went through long wet periods, Jezero's lake beds or shorelines could be some of the best places to look for fossilized signs of past life. Perseverance isn't alone either. 4 other rovers have reached Mars over the years. The very first, Sojourner, landed in July 1997. Then came Opportunity, which was expected to last just 3 months, but ended up operating for an incredible 15 years, until 2018. As for the bubbly rocks, scientists want to know more than just what they're made of. They're curious about where those rocks originally formed, and whether they lie in layers that could reveal how different materials build up over time. Studying their unusual makeup could tell researchers a lot about Mars's inner processes and how its environment shaped the planet's surface over billions of years. And maybe we could finally find out if there was life on the red planet.